All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Friendly Critic Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Murphy. Football is back. What better way to celebrate the return of football than to go through sports movies? So that's what I thought I'd do in this episode. And I get into some sports movies that I really love. So hope you enjoy. Hello, I'm back. Welcome in to another episode of the Friendly Critic Podcast. It's been a while. Kind of had a lot going on. Just moved into a new place, bought a house, all that stuff, house projects. So I apologize for the delay in getting this out there. But yeah, I'm excited to be back, excited to go through some movies and get back in the discussions again. So yeah, I thought today one topic that I been thinking about doing, I thought it'd be good with the season that we're in, is sports movies. I'm a sports guy. If you know me, I've grew up playing sports, grew up watching sports, still love to play sports when I can and watch sports. And with the football season is here, we got college and NFL just started this week. I thought it was appropriate, and I think I found some that, they're sports movies, obviously specific to sports, but they also have some good messages, I think. And those are the ones I like. If you know me, if you've listened to some of my previous episodes, I like the movies that have a deeper meaning or at least a good message kind of thing. So that's what I picked out. So I'm just going to go through kind of ones that I liked and have seen. I think there's definitely some ones that are like top tier that I probably haven't seen or haven't watched the whole thing. So I'm just thinking of like Rudy, for example. I don't think I've seen all of that. So this is not like a list of like my opinion on the best sports movies. These are just ones that I like and think are good. Because I think there's a lot of good sports movies. And there's some, I was just looking at the list too, or a few different lists. There's some that I haven't seen yet, like newer ones that I think would be good to check out. So, yeah, just wanted to clarify that, I guess. I mean, it's the Friendly Critic podcast. I can talk about whatever I want, but just saying they might not be the critically acclaimed best, all around best, but they're ones that I enjoy. I think I'll start with Miracle, or yeah, the movie's called Miracle. It's about the Miracle on Ice. Made in 2004. Kurt Russell stars in it. I think it seems like it's a Disney movie. But yeah, just a classic. If you don't know the story of the Miracle on Ice, this is one of those iconic sports stories. And so it's about the 1980 US Olympic hockey team and their kind of impossible, it seemed at the time, impossible journey through the Olympics to get the gold medal. And so, spoiler there, but it happened in 1980, and it's based on a true story. So, definitely worth a watch. I think I don't know if Kurt Russell. I don't know too much of his work, I guess, but in my opinion, I think one of his best performances. He plays the head coach, Herb Brooks, and he's kind of the main focus. His challenges as the coach, building that team, really going into the 1980 Olympics, thinking there's no shot, we're just gonna, I don't know. At the time, the world power was like the Soviet Union team, Russian team, and I don't know the history, I guess, on it, but I feel like they had won or they had continued this dominance in hockey, and so they were the clear favorites, to win the gold medal. Everyone was expecting them to win all over the world. Pretty much everyone expected them to win, and I think it's interesting not only because it's a true story, right? I think some of the true to life stuff makes the best stories, but also just some of the stuff like how it was a group of college kids at the time. I don't know what the rule was there, but like the college athletes from the United States, not like the NHL professional guys, were on the team. And I'm pretty sure the Soviet guys were like the older professional players in their country. So that was an interesting element. That made it even more challenging, I think, for them, and made it more impressive that they were able to beat them. And yeah, kind of the name of the movie Miracle kind of stems from Al Michaels' famous quote when he's calling the game. He's the play-by-play guy that's calling the game on TV or radio. I think it was TV. And he says, "Do you believe in miracles?" Yes, and he's like yelling it, and because it's super exciting and crazy, super unexpected, and yeah, you'll have to look up the like video. I think there's video of it, of the real thing, and Al Michaels' call of it. Yeah, and it's just a crazy, exciting game and true story. The movie goes into kind of their just development as a team and montage, of their going through the preliminary games and the struggles, of coming together as a team. And there's the great scene, like iconic scene in the movie where they're like practicing and they're I think they screw up somebody screws up, in practice. If you played sports, you know what I'm talking about, where it's like, okay, coach is upset, now they're gonna have to go run, and he says, get on the line, and you're like, oh great, I'm gonna go run for the next like half hour. And he has them do their sprints, essentially, like sprints on skates, but that's like their conditioning. And they do it, and they think they're done, and he keeps saying like again, and they go do it again, and he keeps saying again, and keeps blowing his whistle, and it's like just one of those. It's funny because he keeps doing it, and you're like, when is he gonna stop? But it's also an important scene, I think, just to show like the coach's determination and his belief in the team. Like he wants them to be perfect, or he wanted them to be in peak condition, and he wanted the team to know how serious he was. Yeah, and I think that's anyone who's played sports, had a good coach, can relate to those moments where it's like this is really challenging in the moment. It's difficult. It sucks, but if you get through it, you'll come out stronger on the other side, right? You're more conditioned. You're ready, and I think that's a good kind of parallel to life. That's why I like sports. That's one of the good things I think you can get out of sports is you can learn to go through adversity and push through it and overcome it and come out stronger on the other side. And then sometimes you're rewarded for your work like this. Miracle team. So I also think that this movie was important, or not the movie, but the true event was important to America just because of the Cold War situation. You know, it's 1980, Soviet Union's in power. I'm not a huge history buff on the Cold War events themselves, but I think just the impact that it had for Americans was huge, right? Because you felt like you had this victory over the Soviets when they have this dominant power, their rule over these countries and militaristic evil. So it felt like this good overcoming evil in a sense. I mean, there's complexities involved with the war and everything, but I think just that small aspect of it, and obviously I wasn't there, I can't speak to it, but I think if you ask people, like ask your parents or grandparents who were around at that time, or however old you are listening to this, if you were around at that time, I think the impact for that generation, those generations, was significant. And I'd be interested to hear more about that from one of those people. Because, yeah, I think it was an important time for Americans just to get that victory, even if it's in sports, right? Even if it's just a game, but I think it united the country in a way. I think I'll go on to my next movie. And my next two are kind of similar, which is funny. I didn't think of it at the time picking it out, but I'm going to go with Rocky as my next one. Classic movie, 1976, boxing movie. Rocky. See, he's the main character, Sylvester Stallone. Really, I feel like one of his earlier works kind of kick starts his career. I mean, don't quote me on that, I guess, but I feel like it's one of his earlier works. He gives a great performance. It's just a story. I think it's somewhat based on a true story, but it's a lot of it is dramatized. So I think they take elements of a true story of a guy, but this one is more of, yeah, kind of just the feel of the movie, how it makes you feel and how invested you get into him as a character in his life versus like the story itself, or the true story kind of aspect of like Miracle had. But yeah, if you haven't seen it, Rocky's a small time boxer from Philly, and it's kind of his journey about he gets like a big break, is able to fight for the heavyweight championship. I don't I have to watch it again. I feel like in this one, I don't think he even did any like qualifying fights or like worked his way up. I think he just was like brought on because I mean, he did box. He was kind of a washed up boxer. There's some scenes of him where he's talking with his coach, and his coach is like, "You had potential to be better," and he kind of threw it away, and he turned into like a loan shark guy, or like he worked for a loan shark. But you can see in his scenes, like he didn't. He's like a good guy. He didn't want to do that. There's the scene of him like talking to the whatever loan shark guy, and it's like, do I really have to break their fingers? And you could see the elements of his personality where he's like, he wants to change his life, right? Like he knows what he's doing is wrong, but I think he doesn't believe in himself enough to be more than what he is at the time. And so then he gets this shot of boxing the champ and Apollo Creed, another main character, Carl Weathers, is like the champ. He gives him this shot, right? Like he gives Rocky this shot to fight him because he wants to. It's like his charity work where he's like, I want to fight an unknown fighter. It'll be a great story, great publicity for this fight, Get Rocky in there, total underdog, not expected to win. And he trains and fights, and I think, spoiler if you haven't seen it, I think it ends in a draw, though, for the first one. There's obviously like 2, 3, 4. You can watch those to see what happens in there, but the impressive thing was that like this guy off the street basically was able to go pound for pound with the champ Apollo Creed, and like everyone was shocked and everyone rallied around him, and they had like the kind of the montage training scene. I feel like that's kind of like the iconic training montage that people like, or that spurred on those future movies to do those montages like that. Right? I feel like Rocky was kind of the first movie to do that. For me watching it, it really pulls you in where you're like fighting with him, you're like punching in the air, like just hit him and like block, and you're like getting really into it, like, come on. Like you can do it. And I think it's just a great movie for that aspect because you feel like the adrenaline of the fight, and like you feel for Rocky, and so all of these great elements I think make it a great sports movie. And yeah, everyone loves the underdog story, right? He's like the ultimate underdog coming up to fight Apollo Creed. So yeah, next one, like I said, I picked these two. They're kind of similar. I had Cinderella Man, another boxing movie, 2005. Ron Howard director, Russell Crowe, Renee Zellweger. And this one is interesting because it's more of, I think it differs from Rocky in the sense that it's more about James Braddock and his life, and kind of the background is it's the Great Depression, right? And he's like a washed up boxer. I think his career was kind of done, and then the Great Depression hits, and then everyone, is struggling just to make ends meet, to get any kind of money, just to get food on the table. And I think this movie does a pretty good job of showing some of those scenes and showing the average working class person just trying to survive. And they showed him like where he and his wife like didn't eat at times because his kids needed to eat, and he would go work on the docks and do manual labor and hope that you get picked right for the day's work so you can bring food home. So just really rough. Obviously, people know Great Depression times were rough. But then his story was cool, right? Because he was kind of doing boxing because he needed money, and he was getting some money for these smaller fights. And I'll have to watch this again too, but I think he was fighting in that, and he was starting to kind of pick up steam, like he was beating some guys. And he really was fueled by this determination to provide for his family, right? Like they needed the money, and he needed to bring this for them, even though his wife like hated it, right? Like he's fighting, he's getting beat up, he could die. I mean, it's boxing, but he's like, he's kind of the mind like this is the thing that I'm good at, right? Like, or I could be good at, and I could make it. Like, I could give us more security, get more money, so we can just survive. He keeps fighting his way up to the top, and gets back to the championship, the heavyweight. I think so I need to watch these again. Like doing this podcast makes me want to watch all these movies again. I think he wins it, and that's not necessarily the true essence of the story, right? Because I think even him just making it to the heavyweight championship, he was just like a huge symbol for the community and for not only the community but just like everyone going through the depression at the time of like, hey, this is a regular guy just like all of us, and he's fighting for us in a sense. That's kind of the feel that you get, right? Where he's like all these people like look up to him, and it gives them hope, that they can turn their lives around because of what he's done. Or maybe not even that, just that it gives them hope that like they can make it through this tough time. So I think that's why I appreciate this movie. Yeah, just because of the sheer determination that he has, sacrifice, and yeah, you feel for him and you want him to win, and yeah, and it ties in the historical aspect of the Great Depression, which is interesting. So it's a feel good one, and yeah, just a good story. I'm not sure if it's based on a true story, but also has some, like I mentioned, great actors: Russell Crowe, Renee Zellweger, Paul Giamatti. Yeah, so it's pretty good movie. 8 out of 10 on IMDb. I think it's really like the epitome of sports movies, right? Because it has all those elements that you're looking for in the sports movie. That kind of brings me to probably my last one that I'll touch on, which is Remember the Titans. I think if you think of sports movies, I think most people think of Remember the Titans. It's just a classic football movie. If you're a football fan, American sports fan, you've probably seen this movie. It's got Denzel Washington. He's great as Coach Herman Boone. And then some guys who went on to be good too, like Donald Faison, who plays Petey. He ends up being in Scrubs. He's really young in this movie. Wood Harris, he plays Julius. Seen him in other stuff. Will Patton is Coach Bill Yost. Yeah, so Ryan Gosling's in this too. Pretty good cast. And yeah, this one is another one that's like based on a true story. And it's of 1971 high school football team, that's recently integrated. So desegregated, whatever the right term is. Challenges with that, you have it's really the whole school, but they focus on the football team. So, right, you have the black students and the white students coming together for the first time. It's 1971. And this is Virginia, I think, but it was really the whole country, right, that was dealing with the racial issues of the time. So, yeah, story of this one high school, and yeah, so Denzel Washington is like he plays for Coach Boone that gets brought in. Coach Yost, Will Patton, is the existing white coach. So there's the challenges that go with that. So I think that aspect makes it a great story. And then there's just the whole movie just focuses on the football team's development, right? And it's about the football, but not as more so focused on the players and coaches and how they have to learn to get along, and they really learn that they're not that different, right? Like we're all people, and we can get along, and race shouldn't be a thing that divides people, right? And so they're kind of the trend setters for the community, and it's cool to see, like, you see some of that challenge at first, right? And there's the learning period where there's it's a bit of a culture shock for both sides, and they have to learn about each other. And I think I watched the trailer again, and I think there's a cool line where Denzel is like, "All right, you're gonna spend some time with a different teammate, each week or whatever the time period is," and so they get to bond that way, and it shows how smart Coach Boone was. And I don't know how much of that stuff, I guess, was part of the true story. I don't think we'll really know, but I think the writing for this at least was good in that way, where they show the difficulties of having to come together for the first time, but then it ends up being really cool for how they do come together and work together and have success on the field, and then that turns into lasting relationships with these guys and these teammates. And I think it showed. I mean, I can't speak to the true effect that it had on, like, the real life community, but I think at least in the movie, it made it seem like it spoke to the community, and people could see that these kids could get along. So then the families would be more opened up, and they showed that in the movie, right, where it's like different characters would have, like, another character over to their families for dinner. And kind of the main one was like Julius Campbell and Gary Bertier's relationship, and how it's an unlikely relationship, right? Where they're both kind of stubborn guys, kind of hard nosed, like tough. But then it's like they realize, oh, we're both really similar in that way, and we're both, they end up being great friends, and they both are great leaders for the team. So I think that's cool, and they really highlight that, their relationship. And then I'll give a spoiler warning, just so if you haven't seen it and you want to go see it, because it's a kind of big thing. But, like, at the end, Bertier gets, like, in a car accident, right? And, like, he gets really injured. I think this really happened too. Like, he gets paralyzed. So that was just a huge emotional scene, and Julius is like the first guy there at his bedside in the hospital. And I think that was right before state, or like the state championship game. So that was a huge loss for the team, obviously loss for morale. But then they use it as a motivating force to be like, all right, we're gonna play for Gary, and we're gonna go win this game. And yeah, so it's just a cool story if you like football. And another one of those great movies that I like, where it's about the specific topic, right, of football and a team, but it also has this underlying message of how community can come together, how people can come together, and how we can get through racial tensions, right? And, like, we still have it today, obviously, and there's still issues that I don't think we're ever gonna get completely figured out, because we're all messed up people. But it's just nice to have these stories, right? And, like, a true story like this, where you see, by the grace of God, that people can come together, and even in these times where it feels hopeless, or people are just being mean to each other all the time, that we do have the ability to come together, and make peace and show love to each other, instead of hatred, which will just tear people apart. So all those aspects make it great. And I just like too I think football is a great sport. I think there's something to be said about the safety. I obviously think it's a dangerous sport. I don't know if it's really healthy to play football, but I think that'll, maybe in the future it'll just be flag football, whatever. And that'll be fine because I think the game itself is really cool because it's really the ultimate team game. And this movie exemplifies that, right? Like everybody on the team has to work together to have success. I think that's a reason why football is such a great sport because it's really more than any other team sport where it's like everyone really has to work together, all three phases of the game: offense, defense, special teams, if your team as a whole is going to be successful. And that's a really challenging, and you need great coaches, and like this movie shows great coaching, and then it brings about great life lessons of how to develop as a person, like how to work well in a team, how to work well with other people, how to go through adversity with other people. And that's the kind of stuff that you can take forward into your everyday life, right? Or like life after you play sports. So I think football, if done right, can provide some really valuable life lessons in that way. And this movie is just another way that exemplifies that, right? So I wanted to mention just a quote that I like from this movie where, Coach Boone, he was a tough coach. He's disciplined. He wanted the team to be perfect and successful, right? And so he has this quote where he's like, "We'll be perfect in every aspect of the game. You drop a pass, you run a mile. You miss a blocking assignment, you run a mile. You fumble the football, and I'll break my foot off in your John Brown hind parts, and then you'll run a mile. Perfection." But I think it's a great quote, and if you play football, you can relate to coaches like that, where, they're tough, they'll get on you, and you got to work through it. But great coaches, balance that with also teaching you those important lessons and also encouraging you to be the best version of yourself, right? So just wanted to mention that. I think it's a great one to wrap up when we're talking about sports movies. Thanks for tuning in to the episode so far. Appreciate the feedback that I've gotten. Still settling into our house, and got a baby coming soon. If you know me personally, you know about that. But so I do want to keep recording episodes, but obviously schedule will be kind of hectic. Let me know what you think regardless, and I'll keep trying to get something out because yeah, this was fun. Like I love sports, and I like making this podcast, and I've got some more ideas, and I've got more guests that I want to come on, or have them come on the podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. Appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Friendly Critic podcast. Like I said, every episode, if you don't mind leaving a rating and review after listening, whether it's on Spotify or Apple, I would very much appreciate that. Thanks again. Stay tuned for more.